Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Nicole Zafian, the head of content and education here at CLOC. We're thrilled to bring you today's session, Ask the Expert panel on adopting entity management software for tax, legal, and financial compliance with our presenting sponsor, Athennian. Before we get started, I'm going to run through a quick things with your features on this platform to help you get the most out of today's session. We have our chat feature, which you can use to chat with each other, share your thoughts, and just engage with what you're hearing from today's presenters. Then we also have our Q&A box. So today's session is an Ask the Experts. Some of you have submitted questions ahead of time that the panel will be responding to, but also go ahead and submit questions in that Q&A box because they will take time to respond to those questions live. They have also shared their slide deck as a PDF handout that you can access and download in your resources box. And then finally, as we wrap up today's session, if you could take a moment to click out our brief survey to give us some feedback on today's session. We're also recording today's session, so if you're not able to sit through the full session or you want to come back and rewatch at any time, a link will be sent out tomorrow morning with a link to the recording. And with that, I want to welcome you all again and thank you to our amazing sponsor, Athennian, for putting together this session. I'd like to hand it over to their moderator today, Molly.
Hi there. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I am really excited to introduce you to this exciting topic that we're going to talk about today, which is adopting entity management software for tax, legal, and financial compliance. Let me introduce you to our panelists. So we've got Kirsten Hansen, who also is an Athennian teammate with me over here, and Caroline Keller, who joins us from Republic. Caroline, do you want to introduce yourself? Oh, Caroline, are you muted?
I was. Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. My name is Caroline. I am the Legal Operations Manager for Republic. We are in the alternative investment space. We're a platform. I joined Republic around 2 and a bit years ago. I joined as a paralegal, and then around 6 months in, realized it didn't quite cover the scope of my work anymore, and I was working a lot more in the legal operations space. I joined, we are kind of transitioning from startup to enterprise right now. Our legal team was 3 when I joined, and we're now around 35. So building a tech stack and finding solutions became very important to us.
Awesome. I'll jump in. Sorry, Molly. My name's Kirsten. I lead our customer success team here at Athennian. So that includes customer onboarding, long-term account management, as well as customer support. My background is in consulting, working specifically with companies on digital transformation. So excited to kind of bring that background to our conversation today. Awesome. And I am also going to share a little bit about Athennian, so you have some more background on who we are. We are a modern business entity and subsidiary governance platform. We power teams to be transaction, audit, and compliance ready. So really what that means is we are your central source of truth for all entity data. We provide a cloud-based platform that allows all stakeholders to access this with really flexible permissions. And not only putting your data into that central source of truth, we then get it to start working for you. So through advanced reporting, document automation, and a lot of other features, it's how can you kind of take things to the next level.
Thanks, Kirsten. So today, this is just a brief overview of what we're going to talk about. We'll start with talking about general legal operations challenges and the importance of combating them with tech solutions. And then we'll talk a little bit about entity management specifically and how it affects company-wide compliance. And then we'll go into some adoption and onboarding best practices. The first topic we're going to talk about today is the importance of developing a tech stack. And before we have Caroline jump in and talk a little bit about her experience, I just wanted to pull up this report that we discovered, came out in 2021, and it's by Deloitte. And there were 4 statistics that we found in this report that will sort of guide what we talk about today. And some of them are a little bit interesting, shocking even. So the first one is 75% of legal departments indicated that they are using over 5 technologies to support their legal processes. And I think for the majority of people here who are attending, they can understand that this is most likely true. You need a lot of software solutions to support a productive team. 46% of respondents say that they do not currently have the right tools. And I think finding that fine balance between what tools are successful and what tools are sort of added friction to your day-to-day workflow, I think that's an interesting balance that we'll talk a little bit about later. 40% report that their organizations invest in antiquated or unused technologies. And we'll touch on this, but I think that's a challenge that everyone here can relate to. And then 50% name lack of adoption and change management practices as their biggest concern with technology, which is something that we see on the Athennian side. And I think for an industry like legal that has been hesitant to adopt technology in the past 10 or so years, I think that's something that we're all pretty familiar with. So jumping in on this first slide here, 75% of legal departments indicated that they are using 5+ technologies to support their processes. Caroline, do you want to talk a little bit about what pushed Republic to pick up some new solutions and the importance of developing this tech stack that you have today?
Sure. So around 6 months ago, we were finally transitioned to slightly more of a strategic onboarding solution. But prior to that, it was all just immediate need, where something would pop up and we realized we either didn't have the ability to do that or didn't have the ability to automate that in the way that would reduce work for everyone throughout the company. So we have onboarded probably around 6 or 7, well, the accurate number is 7 solutions in the past couple of 8 months. And a lot of them kind of source from just trying to make sure that everyone in legal and the business users that are interacting with us the most have the ability to complete a task in a way that is organized, makes everyone's lives easier, and again, automate what we can. So one thing that we found the need for was something that would be able to keep a singular source of truth. When we were looking at solutions for this, we obviously have Box, as we have a couple FINRA compliances that we need to maintain. However, we had a lot of entity information that was flying around the company that wasn't maintained and up to date, and legal didn't even know it was there. So we had teams using out-of-date operating agreements, out-of-date shareholder registries that we would constantly have to be like, we have to hold on a second. Can you guys give me a second? I'll bring you guys the most accurate version of this. And kind of had to backtrack a lot of information. So having a single source of truth was really important for us for every single tech stack we brought in, specifically entity management. Our record management system was also really important for contract management. So we also implemented a CSM, as I'm sure a lot of people on this call are aware of how important they can be for especially in-house ability to function. So having clear records for vendor agreements, clear records for just general contracts, and making sure that the correct metadata is being pulled out. AI can pull out where it can, and the team is being notified of what's in the contract, easily searchable, and also being notified when the contract is expiring. The current problem that I was facing, because I joined more as a corporate paralegal, and as we grew to the entity level that we did, we realized that a lot of the corporate applications, the banking applications, the compliance annual checks for international entities, they were requesting consistently almost the same information, but in different kind of organization structures. And we were having to manually compile this information every single time. And specifically for all these entities, even though they're all, again, subs of a parent company, they would all request different pieces of information, and we would have to go on hunting trips to try and find everything, build a new box folder, make a new password protected. And it created a huge amount of burden. And some weeks it would be 10 applications an entire week that we'd have to complete, and some would be 1 every month. And so it's really inconsistent, and it became really, really hard for us to do our job and do everything else we needed to do. And the fourth thing is, whenever we're onboarding a system, we want to make sure that it's consumable for our business users. We do our best to make sure that we're doing change management, communication plans, trainings for individual teams and company-wide, making resources where we can, but simultaneously, we still are going to have some users who are going to just log in and make sure. We need to make sure that it is something that they can, with a little bit of guidance, utilize pretty easily.
Thank you. And I think that goes back to something that we see on the Athennian side a lot, which is that people are implementing technology for 3 key reasons: to reduce human error, to increase productivity and create more efficient workflows, and to stay on the pulse. Because if your partners and your competitors are all using the most up-to-date technology, like everybody else should be as well. And then when we come into choosing the right tools, I'm going to remind you of this statistic here. 46% of respondents say that they do not currently have the right tools. So Kirsten, if you want to take over from here and talk a little bit about choosing the right tools and why a cloud-based entity management system is most likely the right tool for your team.
Yeah. So here you can see 89% of legal department leaders reported substantial challenges with legal entity management, which leads to concerns about deal readiness. And so this really speaks to what Caroline is saying here. When someone asks you for something, how can you make sure the information that you have is up to date when it's scattered across so many systems? Getting your data under control in a purpose-built system that is kind of fully accessible from anywhere is why we do what we do. Making sure that you have this information, but that it's easy to share is also absolutely critical. And so that ties into our philosophy at Athennian, where we have unlimited users. There's no limit to permission access that you can grant, and you as a user are entirely in control of that, so that sharing this information from its source, where it is accurately maintained, makes things really easy for you. Awesome. And this slide is one that we really like to share because we use the term entity management, and it's thrown around a lot in the legal space too, but not everyone necessarily thinks about it that way. This is business critical data to so many different groups and teams, and having it organized in a really consistent way so that anybody logging in, even for the first time, can navigate it in a pretty seamless way. As you can see here, compliance for KYC activities, operations, governance teams, audit and tax, and anyone working on transactions. Having kind of all of those different parties and stakeholders accessing the same record from a source of truth is just going to help you maintain that data accuracy long term. We've even had examples where real estate groups do their asset tracking in Athennian. And it's really, really important to make sure where anyone is making updates, it's to that source record. We talk about reducing human error. It's key that we are all working in the same place in a tool that can help you track those changes effectively.
Thanks, Kirsten. I have this little graphic here that sort of shows the repercussions of having siloed data and like friction in your day-to-day workflows. And I just wanted to ask you, Caroline, can you talk a little bit about your decision specifically to look into an entity management software?
Sure.
And
so
yeah,
so we're talking about silos. That's the best definition that you can give. We had a Google sheet that was updated. It was brought in for specific tax reasons. We had a Google Drive. We had a box folder with around 13,000 documents in it. And again, as we've transitioned to enterprise, we've also been filling out a lot of director levels. We brought in a director of tax and finally stopped outsourcing it. And our director of tax joined, and he was like, "What entity management software do you guys have?" And we were like, "Well, we have this Google sheet. There's that one spreadsheet over there. If you want to look at these 13,000 documents, you might figure out where you need." And he was like, "This is not okay. Although you guys all have this organized in your brains, there was no continuity of business plans. Like if I was out, no one knows who the registered agent is for a very specific entity." And so we started looking into entity management softwares. I looked around 10 different options, took calls on each, and it kind of just became an option for us of, number one, how complex do we want to get? There are some that we probably could have onboarded within a day, would have held core information like EIN, generated a basic level org chart. And when we were thinking about how much we'd grown up to this point and where we see ourselves in 5 years, we quickly realized that a more simple version would not have been adequate for even where we are now, but definitely wouldn't have been for where we are in the future.
Right. Yeah. And I remember you telling us the example of when you were fundraising for your Series B and having to share your KYC requests there, and how much friction there was with sending all of that information through those Google Docs and that siloed information. And then now for anything happening in the future, it all lives in Athennian.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting. I'm sure we'll make deals and move much faster.
Yes, indeed.
So going back to this next statistic, 40% of respondents said that their company invests in antiquated tech tools. Kirsten, do you want to talk a little bit about the market and the timeline of entity management software?
Yeah, I think Caroline said it really well too. there's often a pain that's causing you to look for these types of things, but it's really important to be investing not just for right now, but for your future and thinking about where you want to go and where you want to be. And this is something we see in the landscape is a lot of the competitors and places that people may be coming from an entity management tool haven't even been built in this century. And so that's definitely something you want to be looking at. And this is a slide that we've put together that really just illustrates that. Do you want to be maybe going the fastest route or the cheapest route? Or do you really want to be investing in your future? And that's something that we really pride ourselves in terms of continuous development, continuous growth. And that comes from the feedback cycle we have with our customers and our partners that we work with. So we understand their needs and we understand what they're building for. So you can see kind of on this slide here that we talk about when Netflix launched, because that's a technology everyone is familiar with. It's become so ingrained in our lives. And so the question we ask is, why are you investing in technology that was around before Netflix even existed? It's kind of like the Blockbuster of the world. It's not something in your personal life you would say, I want to be able to go back and have Blockbuster instead of Netflix. And so that's really how we look at it at Athennian. For this one, we want to highlight the key pieces that an entity management solution should be providing to your users and your teams. And the first being that in order to increase your business velocity, you need to be able to reduce that risk and so improve your risk management. And that's going to help you get cost control of your work. And so that risk we see come in the form of not only human error, but just not being able to find that information. That's the time and the money that helps you do things a lot more efficiently. And so in kind of highlighting and understanding what you can expect, we have this idea on the before side. And so it's the reactive. It's what Caroline described. It's you're responding to requests by having to assemble, create different versions of information, share access. And that's just at the request. How do you maintain that and track who you've shared this information with long term? And so having really clean data processes is what having a proactive entity management solution offers. So on the reactive side, it may look like missed deadlines and the fines that come with that, the inability to see kind of what's around the corner for you, the local level of things being a black box, like it's in so-and-so's head and that person's on vacation today, and the time spent just to maintain that information that may be out of date. And so how we view things in the proactive kind of space is that you have control and visibility over this information. I know we've said single source of truth a lot already today, but that really is something that's so important to our team because that gives you the visibility into your information and helps you let it start working for you. So what types of reports do you wish you could run? What do you wish you knew about your entity data? By putting it into a tool that helps kind of you work smarter, not necessarily harder, it's unlimited the possibilities of if someone asks for data in a certain shape or a report that looks like this, you can generate it in a matter of seconds really within Athennian. And so I think that's really important. And also too, making sure you have a clear understanding of your own costs on how these records are maintained, how they're being used, and that visibility in a modern entity management solution as well.
Now we'll get into our third topic, which is implementing your software. And I think with technology projects, a lot of people have concerns about how best to approach this project. With this statistic, 57% of legal departments cite lack of adoption and change management practices as the biggest concern with technology projects. And so, Kirsten, do you want to take over and talk a little bit about adoption and onboarding practices and what you see from your side and some best practices?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most important things that you need to consider is the why behind this. What has caused you to kind of go out on this journey to look for a new solution and to invest the time and energy into this? And that comes through your goal setting activity. It's really important that you lay these out ahead of time and that you're being realistic with that. The other piece is that you are considering change management. What does this look like for your organization? How is it going to change not only how some teams work, but we saw that circle earlier with all of the different departments that this could touch. How is this going to impact not just your legal team, but your broader business. And then in considering that, making sure that you have plans for a communication plan to roll this out in a really effective way. So diving into each of these a little bit more, with goal setting, it's really, really important to kind of have that North Star that's guiding you through this journey when you're implementing technology. What does success look like for you? That's really important that you have a clear understanding of that and that you can communicate that with your vendor. It's really important that you're working with a vendor that wants to help you work towards those same shared goals. At Athennian, we call it our mutual action plan or our MAP document. And that's exactly the path of what is it that you're trying to achieve and how can we help you get there. You have to consider the big picture, high level, and all of those best case scenarios and be open and communicative with those. We talked about what impact this has on your organization, your other processes, other tools. This is a question we ask on every single kickoff, like, what holidays are coming up? Are you also trying to redo your DMS at the same time? These things all have an impact and are going to really determine how successful adopting this technology is. We are not just implementing this for the sake of implementing it. We're implementing it to be used. And that really needs to be your guiding principle with those North Stars when you work through these types of projects. Awesome. The change management side of things. This is really my favorite and where my background comes from is how can we make this exciting? So you can launch a new tool tomorrow. You can say, here's the link, go log in. But helping all of the users and stakeholders understanding how it's going to impact their day-to-day and to get them excited about that and participate in that is really, really fun. And that's really what is going to drive a successful implementation project, is looking at it through this lens of change management and the people who are going to be using it. What type of support do they need? We alluded to training a little bit already, but how does your team want to train? Do you want in-person classroom sessions? Do you want self-guided? And that's really a huge part of our philosophy at Athennian is you will have a dedicated specialist to help you work through this to decide that path that is right for you and your organization. We talked about timing, like maybe rolling this out before the end of the year is not the best idea if it's your team's busy solution. So being clear about kind of those goals and how it's going to impact people when they may already have a lot on their plate is absolutely critical. And again, thinking about how you'll engage different teams. We work with a lot of groups where it's a phased onboarding. And so the legal ops team are the first ones to have access. Once they're comfortable, then we can go with a train the trainer approach. We can do lunch and learns. We can kind of roll it out to a broader audience. Considering all of those things and not just looking at this as buying new technology is really, really critical when you're embarking on this journey. And the communication plan. Who are your key stakeholders on your side? But more importantly, when you're working with a vendor, what does that support look like from their side? Don't be afraid to ask, like, how am I going to be supported through these journey? Here are my goals. How are you going to help me make sure I'm hitting those? What type of support hours do you offer? Do we have live access to people we can ask questions for if we have? What does our account management plan look like? And make sure that what you need to cover, that you have a regular cadence and you know what that communication looks like with your vendor so that you're hitting all of your goals. So, Caroline, is there anything that you'd want to add to some of those points?
Yeah, I think our team's goal, once we realized that we needed a solution really urgently, was just speed. And having that be upfront, especially when you're looking for a vendor, is be like, look, this is the timeline that we have. And this is our dream timeline, and this is where it has to be done by. And I think that having a plan on your side internally of, yes, make sure you have support, make sure you have communication with the vendor, but at the same time, like, make sure that you are adequately staffed and adequately supported to make sure that your team yourself can also focus on it as well.
Yeah, we talk a little bit about at Athennian using your technology vendors as technology partners, and how can they be strategic business critical partners to the growth of your business. And I think that's key when you talk about onboarding a new software and finding the most success out of it.
Yeah, and I wanted to highlight this too, that the onboarding, or kind of that goal you set, whether it's to go live or to launch or have this many users log into the platform by a certain date, adoption doesn't end there, nor does change management. And so this is something that is really important to how we operate at Athennian, is continuing to review those goals in an ongoing process. What are those key indicators that are going to show what success looks like for you? Is it how many records you manage in the platform? Is it how many people are logging in? Is it how many documents you can automate? And those types of things are where we work to support you as a partner to make sure you have that information and that you have all of the knowledge you need to effectively use the tools to reach those goals. There's a lot we do to support our teams through this, but I think the most important thing when you consider this is back to that concept of thinking for the future. Are you going to work for a software that's going to work with a software that fits you right now or fits your team in 5-10 years? What does that growth look like? And that's really important to us at Athennian. We are always evolving, always changing, and making sure that what we have fits with our teams as they grow. It's just like the apps on your phone. It's small incremental changes that continue to make your lives easier and continue to make sure that you're seeing the value from these types of tools.
Caroline, do you want to talk a little bit about your decision to choose software when you were developing your tech stack that will grow with you as a startup company that's moving towards the enterprise level?
Sure. So again, some of our tech stack, we're going to just a dire need, right? We need something that can produce Slacks and discovery. We need specific softwares for immediate needs. But even when we're doing that, we still want to make sure we're making the right decision, because once you've put the time and invested the time in onboarding with the software, you're kind of wed to it, right? It's really hard to spend 7 months onboarding a software and then realize that that wasn't the best software that you should have gone with. And I'm sure everyone on this call has had some experience doing that in the past, of either a software or decision or a way or a solution. But I think that making sure that you're doing your research while at the same time being familiar with customer reviews, making sure that they're exactly what you're saying, support as well, or is very 24/7, or if it's just an email bot. And all of these make really conclusive decision that you need to make sure that you're also deciding internally. Because again, growth, what I think the team might be in 5 years might be different what the GC thinks we're going to be in 5 years. And all of these decisions must be done as a team and with stakeholders. Some of these are entirely legal internal, where we only have 5 or 6 access points, and some are 1,000 access points, and the entire team globally has access. And then if so, we need to make sure that that also fits their needs. So every time we've looked for a software, we've made sure that, again, hopefully it fits us at least right now. But we've made some mistakes. We've chosen some softwares that might not have been right for us. We've spent some time onboarding and quickly realized that it didn't actually solve the problems that we really need them to solve. And that's one of the things that I've actually loved the most about Athennian, is that feedback has always been encouraged. And so if at any point we are like, oh, I'd love if this button was here, something like that, you guys have been really great at incorporating it. But again, it's all about doing your best guess of what's going to help you best in 5 years from now.
Mm-hmm. And we have a couple questions that have come through, and then some questions that you submitted before, when you registered. And so I think we'll take a minute to answer those. And if you have any questions, feel free to pose them in the Q&A box on the side here, and we'll try our best to get to them. The first question, this is one that somebody asked a couple days ago, but it's, how do you create a technology roadmap, and what are the best practices you have? Do you want to take this one, Caroline?
Sure. Yeah. So again, we pretty much started with nothing. When I joined, we had a single seat Westlaw subscription. I mean, again, we only had 2 attorneys and myself, so it wasn't as significant of a need. But as we grew, we realized we needed to be more strategic about building our tech stack, making sure that things are working together. If you're consistently having to put the information in 5 different programs, that's not saving any time. So when we're looking at secondary solutions like DocuSign, BoxSign, all that jazz, you need to make sure that you're thinking as a holistic manner. If you hear that sales team is implementing Salesforce, how can we make sure that our contract management tool is going to be able to generate the contracts through Salesforce? So it's not just looking at legal internally or looking at what one specific need is. It's thinking about how to make sure that we're laying on top of each other and not entirely separate. So Obviously, there are things that are going to come up at a higher priority and a higher need. And some are going to take a lot longer to implement. Our CLM took almost a year, and it's still not going to, I mean, it's functional and we like it, but there's still a lot to grow on it. And there's more integrations to do, more APIs to build. So making sure that you have support from the company itself on if you have APIs or any product needs is really important for a roadmap as well. So one thing I do at the beginning of every year, right now every quarter, is I meet with every team that interacts with legal in any way. And I say, how can we make your guys' lives easier to interact with us and make sure that we are supporting you guys in the way that we can, and then simultaneously ask that question internally of what do we need from business members in order to complete requests or to complete tasks or external counsel requests, et cetera. And with those priorities, I then go to our GC and say, this is what I've heard from the team. Here's some solutions I've thought of, but here's kind of what that means for us in terms of cost, in terms of time invested, and in terms of, again, sometimes making another login. That's also one of the biggest complaints from my team, is that we have so many logins for so many different solutions. And so it's always about, number one, communication of asking around, what do you guys need? And making sure that that's accurately prioritized and communicated, and say, okay, even if this solution helps, it might take a while to get it, or at least into the level that you've been sold it at. So that's always my biggest recommendation for building a tech stack or finding any solutions, is making sure that the roadmap works for everyone, and that everyone is fully aware of the time investment, the cost, and the difficulty of building some of these things.
Thanks, Caroline. That kind of leads me into this second question that we got, which was, how do you convince top managers to introduce technologies? I think, from the technology user perspective, it's really easy to see a value in onboarding a new technology, but then from somebody who doesn't use the product every day, it's a little bit more challenging to see the direct value. So do you have any advice for talking to stakeholders about the importance and communicating the value of these new technology projects?
Yeah, so some teams are always going to be easier than others, right? Some departments have their own procedures and strategies internally that don't always work with the global perspective. And so, for instance, on our CLM, we have one team that uses it thousands of times a day. And when you look at our logins across the company, it's not as utilized throughout other teams. And so I think it's always trying to explain it from the business user perspective of why this will make your life easier, right? For our task management tool, we always explain it to business users of, if we get the correct information on the first go, we don't have to come back to you. We can actually save time. The turnaround just get smaller, right? If we have to go back and forth and ask more information about what this vendor contract is, that wastes more time throughout the team, and we can actually get your task done better. So making sure that you can explain things to business users from their perspective of understanding, okay, this is a different thing that we're asking them to do. It might not always be as intuitive as just slacking us and getting an answer in 3 seconds. But sometimes it allows us, specifically for larger requests, and just also making that very clear of, this is what we need you to use this for, and this is why it will help you out in the end.
Thanks. I just lost it. Oh, I have a question. This is more of a question for you, Kirsten. And it's about data integrity with within the subsidiary database. Can you speak a little bit about Athennian's practices for maintaining data integrity?
Yeah. So at Athennian, we like to think of data almost as a conveyor belt. So think about the first time it lands on that conveyor belt, you don't really want to have to change it. Or if you do, you want to kind of keep it flowing in that cycle. And so Athennian is built really intuitively so that you are changing or making any updates to your data from that source record. And the benefits of a database, rather than say an Excel spreadsheet, it allows you to do things in bulk. And that's one of the biggest benefits, as well as track the changes. So if you have a director who's on 30 different subsidiaries, you can change that one time from their director record, and it trickles down to all of the impacted places. Think about people associated, a registered agent, any dates that need to be changed. That's part of the benefit you get by using a purpose-built subsidiary management tool. That's the data integrity piece, but the reporting feature also helps you review how up to date your data is. You can run reports on when things were last updated, on what changes have been made, have that full audit trail of the status and health of your data. And that's something that we find is really important to our users.
This question here is asking about recurring annual tasks. Do you want to talk a little bit about what Athennian's functionality is for annual reminders and things like that?
Yeah, so this ties into kind of maintaining that source record, again, on your entity or your subsidiary, wherever you have it. There are a number of different dates involved, whether it's for registrations, your home, otherwise. Having that date in there that you're tracking then allows you to use it in a task format. So you can set recurring tasks for every year, so that each year, kind of at whatever cadence you want, whether it's a month in advance of that date, a month after that date, whatever you would like, you can get a reminder based on that, and then use the task to generate any documents, send them to people who need to review them. And again, really start making that data start working for you. So it's not just about maintaining it, it's about what are the steps I need to take and having that really clearly outlined in a task-based system.
This question that just came in is really interesting. It says, I recently joined as an IP paralegal, but my scope is increasingly legal operations. Right now, I'm in the process of vetting CLM vendors. Any advice on kickstarting onboarding technologies, coordinating with stockholders and GC?
Yeah, I have to take that one. CLMs are really important for anyone involved in legal operations, specifically in-house for us. For around 6 months, we were just copying and pasting entity names throughout documents. There was no doc automation. There was no tracking of metadata. Naming structures weren't consistent. And so CLMs it's one of the largest industries in legal operations. If you go to any CLOC event, there's going to be enough people there that will be able to talk to you guys about CLMs. But again, vetting is really important. And I always think that the first stop is what you're doing is vetting is take every call you can. The one thing that I think is the most difficult thing about vetting any vendor is a lot of it comes down to their marketing spend and their SEO spend. So if you Google CLM, whoever is the most proficient at that is going to be the first thing that shows up. So ask around if you can, see what companies in your space are using as well. They might not recommend their own, but they might be aware of something else that might be another solution. But once you vet, I would recommend giving a recommendation to your stakeholders, your GC, the options that you think are the best three with the pros and cons, being very transparent of the responses that you received. For instance, one of the softwares we looked at one point didn't have great reviews on any of the app stores that they had, and they sold themselves on having iPad and iPhone capabilities. So not only looking at all those, which I'm sure you're already doing when you're vetting, but when you're kickstarting onboarding, I always recommend to keep it internal in legal operations or the legal team for the short bit, and obviously until it's at a proficient level, because the worst thing that you can do is build a software, give training, and then realize that it's not at the level that you need it to be, and then have to do a secondary level of training once it's at the level that you want it to be. So obviously there would be some teams or some needs that get in a little bit earlier, like for instance, tax got into Athennian a little bit earlier than it was when it was actually completed. But from a broader scope, make sure that you have a training plan, right? So I always recommend doing something at an all hands level of saying, this is the software that we're implementing. If you don't need each team member to utilize it, then say, if this is something that you think would interest you or would impact your role, please sign up for a training or indicate your interest here. But if it is something that is company-wide, like a CLM, potentially to be utilized, then there's also the question of making sure that each team is receiving adequate training for how they would utilize it. Like finance is training for CLM vendors, or will be more focused for vendor agreements, and so on. So I always think it's all about trying to make a plan. There's no way you're gonna be able to stick to the plan throughout, right? We can have goals, but that goal will also allow you to keep the GC stakeholders and so updated on where you are, but simultaneously give them kind of like an expectation of this is not going to be done in 2 weeks. Some of these things take a long time.
Thanks, Caroline. We're getting some questions about Athennian's functionality, and I think rather than talk about specific features, I really encourage you to reach out to Athennian entity management expert, and they can kind of walk you through how Athennian could possibly work for you in your organization. In terms of resources, we have an extensive resource hub with articles, ebooks written by thought leaders throughout the entire legal industry. We have articles on change management best practices, onboarding best practices, as well as, market insights and technology trends that are coming up in the next year. So if you want to visit our resource hub, you can. It's Athennian.com/resources, and I'll send you a link to this after the webinar. And I just wanted to say thank you to Caroline and Kirsten for joining me today for this webinar, and thank you to Nicole and CLOC for having us. I'm really glad we got to have this conversation, and I think it went really well.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Oh, might be muted.